Hey guys, it's a kind of short video today. I've just finished reading this amazing book. Well, you can see how worn down it is. I've got rid of the OWR, called The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And what this book is kind of very much a masterclass, or very like, is a selection of lessons throughout history of essentially, people who've been able to use power, wield power, and be able to consolidate power. It's got some brilliant laws in there, and all of them can be applied, I think, at different points in your journey to power or having power. What power, at least in my definition of understanding it, means is the ability to get your way with people, and not through brute force, through indirection, through discretion, through being the masterful courtier, as sort of described in this book. And what it gives you, as well as that though, it's a really great history lesson. Like I've learned a lot more about like Athens trying to conquer Sicily and losing, and about the Thessalian War with the Spartans, and about how Sparta was great power and decayed, and then everything about like Napoleon and Talleyrand and why Dante Alighieri was expelled from Florence. All very interesting stuff, and about the power of the Pope and the bourgeois. Um, Caesar Borgia and the whole Medici family. I've learned a lot of that in this book. It's got some really interesting anecdotes from history, which I really love. I'm a big buff for that kind of stuff, so it's great. But just outside of that, it's almost like reading some kind of Dead Sea Scroll or something. What it has is real powerful tacit instructions on how to kind of accrue power and influence, and how to kind of work your way up the hierarchy of things. Now, it does sound very kind of mean spirited and very, it can be used for evil. I mean, like a knife, you can use it for surgery, or you can use it for murder. These are all just tools. We say manipulation, but we also mean leadership is a form of manipulation as well. It's just indirect. It is essentially, influence. Influence really is a form of leadership, and manipulation. It really depends on what ends the tool is used for. I've got to read a few excerpts of some really great sections in this book. Let me just read what was the really stood out to me. I think the in the introduction, some really great laws. For example, what's the really good one stood out to me? Yes, a law 11. So learn to keep people dependent on you. To maintain your independence, you must always be needed and wanted. The more you relied on, the more freedom you have. Make people depend on you for their happiness and prosperity, and you have nothing to fear. Never teach them enough so they can do without you. It's a very crucial law. Especially for me at the moment, I'm working in a job where I'm working me up the company ladder. I've been in the role for a while, but I'm still at a very junior level. It's a startup, and there are obviously going to be more people added to the situation as it grows. But I'm learning to make myself as useful as possible. I was getting so embittered and so kind of emotional about stuff just because I wasn't getting paid, because the work is project based and it's purely a startup. So at the moment, I'm making no profit from the role, but it's simply just been case by case, networking, building a relationship project, and then sometimes it doesn't come through. Sometimes the person turns out to be something else completely. And I'd be getting so bittered and so kind of like, oh, my boss isn't paying me, I'm not getting enough money, I'm getting frustrated. And then I realized it's just all just a game I'm playing. I could really learn to practice some kind of humility here. And humility is a powerful skill as well, and learning just to, not let your emotions get the better of you. Not sort of, turning the other cheek when things happen, really. Another really good one as well is yeah, Law 24. It's kind of touching on what before. Play the perfect courtier. Courtier? Courtier. The perfect courtier thrives in a world where everything revolves around power and political dexterity. He has mastered the art of indirection. He flatters, yields to superiors, and asserts power over others in the most oblique and graceful manner. Learn and apply the laws of courtiership, and there will be no limit to how far you can rise in the court. It's just about like knowing how to like manage that kind of anger and manage that kind of like He makes a very good point here about like people who say they're honest and don't want to play the game. Essentially, where was the point he made about that? I can't find the exact part. I should have highlighted it. I don't think. Ah, to some that people, the notion of constantly playing power games, no matter how indirect, seems evil, asocial, a relic of the past. They believe they can opt out of the game by behaving in ways that have nothing to do with power. You must beware of such people. For while they express such opinions outwardly, they are often among the most adept players at power. They utilize strategies that cleverly disguise the nature of the manipulation involved. These types, for example, will often display their weaknesses and lack of power as a kind of moral virtue, but true powerlessness, without any motive of self-interest, would not publicize its weakness to gain sympathy or respect. Making a show of one's weaknesses is actually a very effective strategy, subtle, and deceptive in the game of power. And the way he writes, it's very kind of classical imagery, and it kind of just makes you realize how important this stuff is. We're all kind of born into a situation where, we go to school, we're in a position of not having power. We go to a work or job, we're not in a position of power, And we see politicians on TV and everyone, and we think we want to be powerful in a sense, And maybe not everyone can be world leaders or whatnot, but all of us can learn how to play the games of power and work our way up the hierarchy. This is stuff that your parents are never going to teach you. This is stuff your teachers are never going to teach you. I don't think, unless you've got very, good family members who are smart and savvy and excel in business or politics or other careers, maybe they could teach you. But for me, at the very least, my parents could never teach me this stuff, My parents are good, solid, honest people, but they don't know how to play the game of power. They don't really know how to do that kind of stuff, and I don't blame them for it, They were never taught as well, but I've got the luxury and this kind of knowledge here of these, all the stuff about, I never knew who Talleyrand was, to be honest, but apparently he's one of Napoleon's closest advisors and just a supreme acrobat in terms of political dexterity and knowing which way the tide was going in 19th century France. Let's see here. Yeah. Essentially, according to the morality of using power and all that sort of stuff, he talks about here. Power is essentially amoral, and as one of the most important skills to acquire is the ability to see circumstances rather than good or evil. Is the ability to see circumstances rather than seeing it in good or evil. Power is a game. This cannot be repeated too often, and in games you do not judge your opponents by their intentions, but by the effect of their actions. Let me say that again for the people at the back, Power is a game. This cannot be repeated too often. And in games, you do not judge your opponents by their intentions, but by the effect of their actions. When you're playing a chess game, for example, you don't judge your opponent by his intention to move that pawn or his potential, what he might have intended to do. You judge what he's actually moved on the board. In the same way, power's a game, and a very complex game. Us humans love playing games, really. We're kind of game-making animals. Homo ludens, as someone once quoted. You measure their strategy and their power by what you can see and feel. How often are someone's intentions made the issue only to cloud and deceive? What does it matter if another player, your friend or rival, intended good things and had only your interests at heart, if the effects of his action led to so much ruin and confusion? Trying to do a good thing and just just going to terribly wrong, It is not natural for people to cover up their actions with all kinds of justifications, always assuming they have acted out of goodness. You must learn to inwardly laugh each time you hear this and never get caught up in gauging someone's intentions and actions through a set of moral judgments that are really an excuse for accumulation of power. It is a game. Your opponent sits opposite you. Both of you behave as gentlemen or ladies, observing the rules of the game and taking nothing personally. You play with a strategy and you observe your opponent's move with such calmness you can muster. In the end, you will appreciate the politeness of those you are playing with more than their good and sweet intentions. Train your eye to follow the results of their moves, the outward circumstances. Do not be distracted by anything else. And sort of brilliant quote here from Nietzsche as well. The value of a thing sometimes lies not in what one attains from it, but what one pays for it, what it costs us. What are you willing to pay for this thing? And a sort of cautionary warning here, you can just read this as a book, what does he say here? Finally, this book can be browsed through and picked apart for entertainment, for enjoyable ride through the foibles and great deeds of our predecessors of power. A warning, however, to those who use this book for this purpose, it might be better to turn back. Power is endlessly seductive and deceptive in its own way. It is a labyrinth. Your mind becomes consumed with solving its infinite problems, and you soon realize how pleasantly lost you have become. In other words, it becomes most amusing by taking it seriously. Do not be frivolous with such a critical matter. The gods of power frown on the frivolous. They give ultimate satisfaction only to those who study and reflect, and punish those who skim the surfaces looking for a good time. I'm not going to go any further than that, guys. You're going to have to get the book and check it out for yourselves. But it is essentially a masterclass in lessons from history, how to apply power, how to work your way up, and it's all for different levels of power. If you're a leader in a business, there are rules in here for you. If you're starting out entry level, there are rules in here for you. It has been a real joy. It's been a real joy to read, actually. It's been a real pleasure, and I highly recommend this book, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Take care, everyone, and remember, choose purpose over pleasure.